This is Marsh samphire, Salicornia europaea, also known as glasswort. This is a really good wild vegetable from the amaranth family. It's a salt-loving plant and it's quite succulent. You'll find it in salt marshes and mud flats around the coast and especially in estuaries. Marsh samphire is at its best in June and July before it starts developing its woody stem. So about this stage is perfect here. Use a pair of scissors or a knife to snip the stem, leaving a part of the base to regrow. And be careful not to uproot the plant when harvesting. They grow upright to about 30 centimetres when they're fully mature, and the stems start off bright green and then go a bit of a duller green. The stems are quite heavily jointed and they almost look a little bit like cactus, and they have small lobe-like leaves at the joints in the stem. There's not really much you can mistake marsh samphire with apart from other edible Salicornias, or maybe sea blight when very young, which is also edible. Marsh samphire is a plant you can usually expect to get quite muddy when you're harvesting, but we've had a really dry couple of weeks, so this ground, which is usually quite deep in mud, has gone really dry, so it's a lot easier to collect at the moment. As you can see, there's still masses of this just coming up now. This is all still a bit young, so I'll come back in a few weeks and collect some of this. The tidal estuaries have got quite deep mud a lot of the time and fast moving tide, so they can be quite dangerous places, so if you're not sure what you're doing, it's best not to come on your own. So when they're young like this, I just like to eat them raw. They're delicious, they're really salty and crunchy. You can also steam them, serve them with butter and a squeeze of lemon juice, and they go really well with fish. There's no need to season though, they're already quite salty. Here's one that I'm always happy to find. This is chicken of the woods. It's a fairly common mushroom that starts popping up in June, and then you'll find it throughout the summer. Its main hosts are oak, cherry, beech and chestnut, although it's especially found on oak. This is a old fallen limb of this beautiful old oak tree here. I'd say it's fairly safe for beginners. There's not really much you'll confuse this for, apart from maybe a very young giant polypore, but that's edible anyway. With giant polypore, you'll pretty much only find it growing right at the base of beech trees rather than on oak like we have here. This is a very young specimen. They will grow into quite large overlapping shells, so I'm just going to take maybe about half of this one and then let it keep on growing. So when it's young like this, it's got a bright sulphureus yellow colour around the margin, and on top it's more of a vibrant bright orange colour, and as the mushroom matures it will go a paler yellow. It's a really nice colour. There's not really much you'll mistake this mushroom for when it's at this stage with this bright sulphur colour. That's pretty much only chicken of the woods. It looks like this. So underneath you'll see it has pores instead of gills, because this is a polypore mushroom, and those pores are either off-white or pale yellow. see the flesh, when it's younger, it's kind of a pale yellow. As it matures, it'll go white. And it's very, very soft at this age. It will go a little bit firmer as it matures. This is a really tasty mushroom. It's one of my favourites. And it really does taste like chicken. It even has the same texture. So if you're a vegan or vegetarian and you miss eating meat, then this is the best meat substitute you'll find. My favourite way of cooking it is making sun-fried chicken of the woods. I've made a video on how to make this. I'll leave the link in the description. Just a couple of quick warnings on chicken of the woods though. A very small percentage of people have a bad reaction when they're eating chicken of the woods, like a swelling or numbness sort of allergy. So only eat a small amount on your first try just to make sure that you don't have an allergic reaction. Also, it's best not to eat these from the poisonous yew tree. It's not clear if the toxins are passed from tree to mushroom, but I don't personally take the risk. It's not really been proven either way yet. And also the needles of the yew tree, if they get caught in the mushroom, then that can be very dangerous because they are deadly poisonous, the needles of the yew tree. So if you're not sure on how to identify a yew tree, then I've covered it a few times in videos. I'll leave a link in the description. If you want to learn to forage mushrooms, I highly recommend you get to learn your trees first, because it's a lot easier finding the host trees of mushrooms than just going out blindly trying to find mushrooms. In June, I love the smell of elderflower when out walking. They've got very fragrant flowers with a sweet smell and a flavour that works really well in summer drinks. I like to make elderflower cordial every year. And elderflower fritters are another early summer treat, and elderflower syrup to pour over ice cream. The flavour of elderflower pairs really well with strawberry or gooseberry. Early June is the best time for collecting the flower heads. Elder is a very common small tree that grows all around the UK, in parks, along country roads and in woodlands, though in woodlands the flowers might not be as good as they need a lot of light. Elder has a bark that's quite light in colour and it's quite soft and spongy. You can quite easily dig your nail into it. It's best to collect the flower heads on a dry morning, as rain will wash away a lot of the pollen, which is where the flavour comes from. Also, when you harvest them, you want to keep them upright, don't tip them over because the pollen will fall out. Also, you definitely don't want to wash them because again that will remove most of the pollen. What I usually do is just leave them in a container or a basket in the garden for a few hours to let any bugs crawl out and escape. Only the flowers and cooked berries of elder are edible. The leaves, stems and raw berries are mildly toxic, and you want to remove as much of the stem as possible when using elderflower. Elder leaves are compound, so made of many leaflets, and they have either 5 or 7 leaflets, which are in opposing pairs, and then one terminal leaflet. The leaflets are serrated and the stem is channeled. The flowers are creamy white and grow in dense flat-topped clusters, and the individual flowers are very small and have 5 petals. So they have a very nice sweet smell, as I said, but the ones that aren't fully opened can have a really nasty putrid smell. There are many plants that have similar looking flowers growing in white umbel-like clusters, but as long as it's growing on a tree and you follow the ID features of the bark and the leaf structure, and the flowers have a sweet smell, then you can be sure you've got elderflower. In May I said about foraging thistle stems. Now in June you can harvest thistle chokes. So look for the unopened flowers. The larger the better. So one like that is about perfect. It is quite a lot of work for a small thistle choke, so it's not one I do very often, but it's definitely worth a try. So you have to very carefully peel back the bracts and the spines. They are very sharp, so it's best to do it with gloves, but if you don't have gloves you can do them without. You just have to start from the centre and carefully peel them away. Now they taste very much like artichoke hearts, and that's because artichokes are a cultivated type of thistle, so they are very similar. So I quite like to eat them raw when I find them out on a walk, just have a couple as a snack. They're also good steamed and pan fried, or you can steam them and puree them, so it's very much like a artichoke puree. All thistles are edible, and thistles are easy to identify because all of them have leaves with spiny tips, and they all have overlapping bracts directly below the flowers with spiny tips. Here's a nice patch of thistles with the flowers in good condition to pick for chokes. You can also pick the flowers once they've opened, and these just make a nice colourful decoration in your salads. Back in April I talked about common hogweed shoots, and now we can harvest my favourite part of the plant, the common hogweed flower buds or florets. These really are delicious. They're like a wild broccoli with a slight cardamom flavour. You can see the flower buds are protected by a sheath before they open up and form the umbel flower clusters. So this is when they're at their best stage, and you can just collect the whole thing and steam them in their casing. There's another nice one there. And get a really nice sweet cardamom smell from them. As I've said before, you need to be really careful with this family. The carrot or Apiaceae family isn't for beginners, as there are some deadly members in that family. With common hogweed, just always check that the stems and leaves are covered in a white downy fur. The stems can either be solid green like this, or here's a good example next door. They can be a solid purple, but they're not green with purple or red spots, because that could be several other dangerous members of the family. I have done a video on common hogweed in a lot more detail. If you do want to forage this plant, then I recommend watching that video. I'll leave a link in the description. These really are one of the best wild vegetables you can find in the UK. I'll just use them in place of broccoli. I'll add them into stir fries. They're also really good dipped in a tempura batter and fried. You can also roast them and cover them in cheese sauce like you would cauliflower cheese. This is self-heal, Prunella vulgaris, also known as heel-all. an edible herb from the mint family. As its name suggests, it's a healing medicinal herb. So it appears in June and grows throughout the summer and sometimes into autumn. It's a low growing spreading plant which you can find in quite large patches in most types of grassland. It's a perennial, so once you find a good patch it should grow back every year. This plant has been used as a healing herb throughout history. Traditionally the leaves, stems and flowers were dried and powdered for making a herbal tea. I don't know too much about herbal medicine, but it's supposed to help with bowel diseases and problems with the stomach, as well as sore throats and glandular problems. It also helps to staunch bleeding and heal small wounds when applied directly to the wound as a poultice. This I have used it for, and I can say it works really well to help stop bleeding on small cuts. And it's high in antioxidants and many different micronutrients. So with self-heal, the leaves are oval to elongated and they grow in opposite pairs. And they have a square stem like all mints do. So you can easily roll it in your fingers. So the flower heads are quite distinctive looking because they're quite cylindrical. And they have quite densely packed purple flowers which usually aren't all open at the same time. Now in medieval times they believed that plants gave clues as to what they're supposed to be used for. So this one, the flowers look kind of like an open mouth with two glands at the side, so they believed they should be used for healing the mouth and the glands. And it turns out this time it's actually backed up by modern science. I'm not sure if that's luck or not. Immediately below the flower head you get a pair of leaves that look a bit like a collar. So self-heal can look a little bit like bugle, but with bugle the flower heads aren't as cylindrical. Bugle is also a member of the mint family, and all mints are edible. These are the fruits or seed pods of honesty, Lunaria annua. In April we looked at foraging the flowers and leaves of this plant, and now in June we can harvest the seeds. Honesty is a member of the cabbage or mustard family, and you can use these seeds for making mustard. So the seed pods are almost see-through. You can see the round seeds inside. And when they're green, these seed pods can be eaten whole, and they taste a bit like horseradish. As they mature through the summer, the seed pods will go papery, and then you can just open the pods up and harvest the seeds. The Lunaria part of this plant's name refers to the moon-like appearance of the seed pods.